I think everybody is here. I would need a motion to come out of closed session, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll start the voting to come out of closed session with Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Philip McCraw,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And now we need to certify that the only thing we spoke about in closed session were the items at which we went into closed session for, which were in section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia. We discussed only in A1 and A7, and therefore be it resolved that the Carroll County Board of Supervisors hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session to which the certification applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion by which this closed session was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting to which this certification applies. And if you agree with it, I hope you would say I so certify, and I'll start with Mr. Moore.
I so certify.
Mr. Robbie McCraw,
I so certify.
Mr. Hill,
I so certify.
Mr. Philip McCraw,
I say certify.
and I so certify. We've already called the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Mr. Moore if he'll give us our invocation and pledge, please.
All right. It's all right. Dear Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings you've given us, and thank you for the beautiful weather we got to enjoy today, Lord. Continue to watch over us and bless the board tonight as they take some of the things for the citizens and due diligence with them, Lord, and continue to bless us and watch over us and help us through the Thanksgiving holidays and help us reach out during the holidays to the less unfortunate, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tracy. Our first item on the agenda is citizens' time, and I have two that have signed up. I would remind you that you have 3 minutes which to speak, and please come to the podium and state your name, please. Timothy Blair is our first speaker.
My name's Tim Blair. I live in Idaho, Virginia. Right there where the horse show ground is at. And my problem is the noise when they have that open air concert. Y'all don't have no noise ordinance, do you? Carroll County?
Not that I'm aware of.
What is loud noise? How you describe loud noise without a decimeter?
Sir, it's time for you to make public comment. It's not a Q&A.
It rattled the windows in my house for 3 days. I went there and complained, didn't help a bit. They said, we got this rain in it, we can do what we want to. Well, I get my bike on and take the muffler off of it. Run up and down the fence line. I drown them out. There's got to be something done. Whole Idaho complaining about it. Wick County can't do nothing about it. But it's in Carroll County. And the fire department got that land leased, I'm aware of it. But something's going to have to be done. I'm going to get a petition up if it'll help. The truck pulls and that don't bother me. But when they have that hippie festival down there in August, that bothers me. They play vulgar music with all kind of vulgar language in it. And I got grandkids playing in the yard. I called Carroll County Sheriff Department. They said we can't do nothing about it. But that very night, a girl OD'd down there. Whether she lived or not, I don't know. But I live right in that mess. If I call Jeff Campbell, I'm gonna do it. Carroll County needs a noise ordinance. That's about all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. We will try to take that under advisement and see what we can get for you. We'll have to wait and see, but thank you. David Boatman is our next speaker.
Good evening. Hope y'all are doing well tonight. Tonight makes basically 1 year I've been coming here, letting the public know about the Acadia purchasing the Life Center facility over to the training center coming from Galax. My understanding is no action on the land has been done yet. It has not been purchased or closed. It is still under contract with the state. It's also been brought to my attention that Acadia Health may be waiting. The longer they wait, the less the bond is for the state. The more the state pays off, the cheaper they can get it. All they have to do is satisfy the bond. Going to pick it up for less than $3 million. This is what I'm being told. A year ago, you told me that it would take 1 year to do an ordinance. We've had a year. I'm excited tonight to hear what that ordinance may be. Hopefully have y'all vote on it. Get something done to protect the citizens of Carroll County, the immediate communities, and the taxpayers. Where are we at in filing a land dispute case in court with the state over our land? It belongs to Carroll County citizens. We paid for it once. We can ask for it back. We can take them to court and make them give it back to us. What I can't believe is that if nothing happens, are we just going to sit by and allow the liberals in Richmond to dictate what we do with our land in our county that we paid for? I don't think that's right. I'm asking for your help. Y'all know what your authority is. There are ways to do things with ordinance. There are ways to do things in court. The attorney has verified what we can do publicly in different meetings. So I'm here tonight to just see what exactly we are doing. My grandfather and father, 32nd degree Masons of Scottish Rite, raised me. You put service over self. That's why I keep coming. That's why I cannot let up in trying to help my neighbors and my county. That's why I'm here every time, away from my family, to ask y'all for help for this community. Please, time is not up. Y'all can still do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boatman. Those two were the only ones who signed up. Would anyone else like to speak during citizens' time? If not, we will continue on with the agenda, and our next item is the payment of invoices. Did you get your question answered, Rex?
Yes. Make a motion to approve the payment of invoices.
Thank you. There's been a motion to pay the invoices. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll start the voting. Mr. Philip McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Our next item is to approve the minutes of our October 12th meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or additions that they would like to make to the minutes? Or approve them as written?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on approval of the minutes from last meeting? Hearing none, I'll start the voting with Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Philip McCraw.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Our next item is new business, and the first one is a financial policy recommendation. Is there someone here to speak to that?
So tonight we have R.T. Taylor from Davenport. Currently, we're working with them to pursue some different things for the county, one of which is going to be some bond refundings for some potential savings. As part of doing that, what they're doing, and hopefully presenting on tonight too, is going to be some financial policy updates. The one that you all have reviewed, I've sent to them. They've had some modifications, and I believe you all have the copy in front of you tonight. That is the most recent revised copy. They're currently going through it, making some revisions. All these things are geared towards what bond rating agencies are looking for localities to have in place. They're working on some other things for us, but this is kind of their first and foremost focus. But I'll turn it over to RT for more specific.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Board, for having us here this evening. Again, my name is R.T. Taylor. I'm with Davenport and Company. We have been working with Mike and Justin to get some details on the county's finances. We are in the throes of putting all that work together and doing the analytical work this month, which will sort of slide us into December. And we would hope to come back to y'all around mid-December to have some updates, if you will, some preliminary analyses, some thoughts. As Justin mentioned, there is a potential refunding opportunity as well that we're looking into for you all. But that'll go hand in hand with the more global, holistic, comprehensive financial review we're doing for the county. As part of that process, we have reviewed the initial draft language in the financial policy guidelines. We've made some comments along the way. That's an evolving process. I think when we come back maybe mid-December and share some initial observations, they can get further fine-tuned. But really what the document does for the county is it memorializes a lot of the things that y'all are already currently doing. But by virtue of setting that framework and memorializing it, making it official, adopting these policies, it sends a message to the credit markets that you have that framework from their perspective. One of the key considerations when they're doing a rating is what kind of framework is represented under management. So that's one of their key parameters on their scorecards, if you will. And so the financial policy guidelines serve that purpose to show what management is following, and it's not just staff, it's the county board. And one key important part to that is that it survives each board, right? So you might have some board members turn over from time to time, but these would survive over the years. Now, will they be amended? Will they be revised, updated, et cetera? Certainly, it's a living, breathing document, but it's a document which provides the parameters, excuse me, to operate and meet certain targets. Like when you look in here about your reserves, you'll see one tweak we made from putting the rainy day monies, if you will, in committed fund balance to unassigned fund balance. So there's three categories in your fund balance that are a little bit more flexible than restricted. But even within committed, that's seen by the credit markets, whether it's the bond rating agencies or the bank down the street, that's seen as a little bit more of a, call it a lockbox, if you will. So by virtue of moving your unassigned fund balance policy to the rainy day funds of, call it roughly 60 days on cash on hand, or 16 to 17% in round numbers, that provides that flexibility from the credit markets looking at. But by virtue of having the financial policy guidelines and stipulating your parameters, your targets of 16 or 17% for your rainy day funds, it shows that you are not giving a nod to setting those parameters and not wanting to dip into those funds, even though those are pretty flexible funds. The next level, there's actually a revenue stabilization fund, which would add another 3% to that level. And that's like, if you think of it this way, we're in the process of a pandemic. If the county were to experience a revenue shortfall in a given year, that's what that additional reserve monies would help you sort of help manage through that process. And then there's another level too that's in here as well, 2% for your capital program. And you could think of that one of two ways. I, as the county, want to move forward and fund annually a certain level of capital projects. I don't want to necessarily have to go to the lenders to get it, to do it either. So that would be where that 2% comes. But let's say also you're putting aside that money, maybe as we are right now, rates are so low, maybe you want to go borrow it because it's just cheap money, for lack of a better way of putting it, and you can use that additional 2% to sort of shave the debt service on it to get you through a bottleneck of what your current debt profile has. So that's just some ways to think about it. That's how we're thinking about it as a guiding document to help management through the years. This is not meant to be for like a one-time, 1 year only, but rather decades would survive boards. Another thing you'll notice in there are the debt policies. And in the capital planning part of the process, annually the county staff and board would come to terms and adopt within your budget each year a capital program that looks out maybe 5 or 10 years. So you've identified projects that are real, and you've identified offsetting sources for that, whether it's a combination of your cash, reserves, debt funding, grant monies, et cetera. So that's sort of where they come involved there, setting those parameters, what we're going to do each year, and that gets adopted again annually in your budget. And then you'll see also in the debt ratios in those policies, we have actually culled out one, the debt per capita one. That has become less and less of a benchmark at which the credit markets look at. The concept there is that that particular ratio doesn't really track with inflation. But your debt to AV or your debt to assessed value, how much debt can your tax base support? So your assessed value has growth to it over the years, as does potentially your debt to go with your project. So that's where that concept of tracking over time with valuation, what can your tax base support, that's where that makes sense. Another thing is what we call debt service to expenditure. So out of your combined county and school budgets, how much debt service does your total budget represent? And you'll see that that's at one of the stronger end of the ratios we have proposed in here so far is at 8%. And that's a good level a strong level from how the credit markets view it. So I sort of jumped right into it and gave my spiel, but I'm happy to address any questions, talk through any of it that you'd like to do.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Taylor?
I just think you're on track, what we're looking for.
Well, we get a lot of help from staff, so that's why I said we're in the throes this month and hopefully in a position next month by your mid-December board meeting to bring something back to you and give some of those preliminary initial thoughts and analysis. So, okay.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Appreciate you being here. Mr. Derwin, I think maybe are you up for zoning discussion now?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Luttrell. Aaron, if you want to come on up, I'll give you sort of the intro and we can kind of talk through it. This is Aaron Sizemore from Mount Rogers Planning District Commission. as the board's aware, the Planning Commission's been in the Carroll County Planning Commission has been in the process for the last several months of trying to review in depth the comprehensive plan and identify areas that need to be updated. It's been 10 plus years since we've done a review and update of the plan. And additionally, the board has asked about the process for adopting a zoning ordinance. I've reached out to Mr. Sizemore to talk about both of those issues tonight, just to give the board a brief update or a brief overview of what the process would look like as far as updating the comprehensive plan and preparing of the zoning ordinance in terms of what steps that would look like, what public engagement would be solicited typically, and what public hearings we would be holding, and then additionally timeframes and cost. So, Mr. Sizemore, if you can.
So the comprehensive plan is the simplest because you already have one. And depending on how in-depth you want to go, the PDC reviews comprehensive plans for lots of different localities. And so we, generally for a county, you're looking somewhere around $20,000. It'll probably take us about a year. We get done quicker than that, but generally by the time Planning Commission goes through their legal requirements, public hearings and so on, and you all have to do the same, and that sort of thing, usually ends up being at least 8 months, but I always say a year, just so I don't run over. Now zoning is a whole different animal. It becomes a part of the ordinance that's enforceable, right? So with your comprehensive plan, everything that you write is, this is how it used to be, this is how we want it to be, this is where we are now kind of thing. This is a picture, a snapshot in time of where you are and where you want to go and how you want to get there. And a comprehensive plan is a great planning document to help you make decisions on, but when it comes down to zoning, it makes it so that you have to have a zoning administrator. Obviously, somebody has to say, in this zone, you can or can't do this or that, and you're not doing it, so now we're going to court over it, and it's a different document. It's a part of the ordinance, and because of that, there's some legal requirements to get it in your ordinance. But basically, whatever it takes for you to update an ordinance is what it takes to be able to put a zoning plan in there. However, a change that big would probably take at least a couple public hearings, and you may yourselves, or the Planning Commission may decide to go out into even more public hearings, depending on how in-depth you want your response to be from the community. I'll say it that way. But with that being said, it is possible. There has to be a political will to do it, because you're going to, have people say, you can't tell me what to do with my property. This is Southwest Virginia, and we do all normally still feel that way to a certain extent, right? So you're going to have that. We're going to borrow somebody else's who's good and pick 2 or 3, and we're going to go through with the Planning Commission, and they're going to say, we like these parts and these parts, and we're going to start to make this thing make sense and put it together. Probably a $50,000 process to do a new one. To update an old one's about 20. It's about like a comprehensive plan. It will take at least a year also, and it would be complicated to do them both at the same time, but it's possible to try to do both at the same time. And what that basically would mean for me is I'm going to have to put 2 teams on it instead of 1 team, because one person can't do both at the same time. It's too much. Probably I would dedicate some sort of a project lead, and then somebody who would be specific to each project if you tried to run it at the same time. And that's in my mind, I'm getting too far down in the weeds, because I don't know how I would handle it until it came time to actually do it. So I can do it. Those are my prices and the length of time that it would take. With a zoning ordinance, the good thing is, with a comprehensive plan, when you're finally done with it, you may or may not do all or none of the things that are in the comprehensive plan. Zoning, because it is enforceable, what you'll have is the county will itself progress toward those land uses set out and allowable activities or allowable buildings set out in each zone. Because the way it is now, I've never seen a zoning ordinance that did not have some sort of a grandfather clause in it. So what I'm saying is, you can't throw down a zoning ordinance with a map and then go start telling everybody they're out of compliance. You probably can do it, but if you want people showing up here with staves and pitchforks, that's how you do it. Normally what happens is you have a grandfather clause, and as those properties change use or change hands, you're all the time moving toward that zoning compliance, even though you may not be there when you first started. And because, again, because it is a legal document, because it is enforceable, it's something that actually does get done over time.
As people develop their land, they're going to come more and more into compliance. Each development's going to,
Exactly.
everything that new is going to be under the new zoning,
Yeah.
and that's how you keep working towards.
Right, and I make that point because some people want zoning and they think, well, as soon as we adopt this thing, we snap our fingers and the whole thing changes, and it just doesn't do that. But also, some people, most everybody lives in the middle, but there's some people all on the other side saying, you can never tell me what to do. And so zoning actually lives in the middle, where over time, as people build, develop, property changes hands, changes uses, you work your way toward it slowly. So it's not a document that turns the world upside down, but it is one that gets results, whereas a comp plan doesn't always get results.
Now, if I could ask a question or two, Dr. Littrell. The sense I've gotten from the Planning Commission's review so far is that there's a broad agreement on the priorities that were set in the existing comprehensive plan, but there's also a consensus, I think, that the plan needs to be updated in terms of the data that's in there. Things like mapping, census data, land use data, and it's sort of those specialized areas of expertise that I think the Planning Commission and the county would be looking for some assistance. And is that something, the mapping and the census data and the data compilation that?
Yes, generally, if we redo all your maps, it's about $5,000 more than what it takes to do a review. We always do your data, we always pull census data, we always do your economics and your population and all that stuff. But to get the mapping done, we actually have to drive the whole county, look at every building, mark what its use is, and mark what kind of shape it's in. That obviously takes a while to do. And I actually did that. That was one of the first things I did at the PDC. It's a long job. and you gotta do residential, commercial, industrial, that type of stuff. And for the residential houses, you gotta mark what kind of shape they're in, because oftentimes that gives you a good sense of your housing stock and whether you need to invest in it, and so on and so forth.
And as far as the zoning side, the process you've described it would be in collaboration with legal counsel. We'd be working as a team to draft that ordinance and solicit public feedback.
Yes. I guess usually I have done it through Planning Commission. I did Marion's zoning ordinance maybe 4 years ago. And most of it came through the Planning Commission, but the difference in zoning that you don't have with a comprehensive plan is if your attorney is not present through the whole thing, they at least have to review it, because there inevitably is that time where the planner thinks it's a good idea to write this down, and the attorney says that's illegal, you can't put that in there. So we do our best and we know what we're doing, but there comes a time where someone who really knows how to dot the I's and cross the T's has to clean it up for us.
Any questions from the board on that?
Any board members have a question?
I have another question. I mentioned the mapping in the context of the comprehensive plan update, but as far as creating the overlays for each zone and creating that mapping.
That's tricky, but it is doable. What you have to have or have to start with is a map that you are relatively confident that your property lines are correct. because zoning always runs along property lines. And then as you set those zones up, somebody from my office has to sit there and click on every line and, you know, make it, connect the dots.
Generate the,
Because inevitably what happens is we create this overlay, and if we don't do it off of property maps, and someone's gonna pull up the map and they're gonna say, well, half of my property's on this and half of it's on that. That's a mistake. It's never done that way. You know, the property line, you're either zoned in or you're zoned out, depending on what zone you're looking at. So, that's a tedious process, but yes, we do it.
okay. And you had mentioned grandfather clause, and you're referring to not only grandfathering, but non-conforming uses, pre-existing non-conforming uses.
Non-conforming.
Yeah. And essentially what that means, that we've discussed this in prior meetings with the board and with the planning commission, is that any existing use that's in existence on the effective date of the ordinance is a legal non-conforming use that can remain in effect but not be expanded as long as the user continues to use it in that manner, not change the use, not expand the use, not destroy it and rebuild it. So,
Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it than I did, but that's what I was getting at.
Anyone have any questions?
Well, I'm not hard to get a hold of. So if you do have questions later, you just want to call and talk to me, that's fine. I'm happy to do it, and I appreciate the chance to come up here and get to see you all again and be a partner with you. And I hope just, you know, from the PDC perspective, I hope you feel like that we're partners working together, because I feel like we are. We do some work here.
and
Now, you are working with the planning commission, is that correct?
No, I am with the Mount Rogers Planning District Commission.
I know, but are you helping our planning commission, or at this point?
No, I'm
Not yet,
not.
okay.
Yeah. That's what, if you decided to hire us to do your comprehensive plan, that's who I'd work with.
Appreciate your information.
one of the benefits of working with the Planning District Commission is it's a governmental entity, so you do not have to go through procurement in order to solicit a proposal from the PDC or to enter into a contract with the PDC. So that can help expedite the process if the board is so inclined. The way I would see it working is we would formally request a proposal from the PDC. If the board is inclined at that point to approve the proposal, then we would enter into a memorandum of agreement setting forth a timeline and a scope of work, and we would move forward.
Yes, that's correct. And generally, it costs less to go with the PDC. You are due paying members, so there's a portion of that contract, no matter what work we do, that ends up being, you know, charged to, whether it's our planning monies through ARC, DHCD, EDA. We have those other ones that we lean on so that we are able to lower the cost of the work that we do directly for localities.
And I think I've shared some cost estimates with the board in closed session from private providers, and that certainly is in line with my experience.
Yeah, those will give you sticker shock.
A little bit.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is to set a public hearing for a utility easement. We have a letter from the town of Hillsville. They're working on upgrading their sewer and wastewater system. And apparently, one of their areas is through one of our properties, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But they also ask if it be signed by November the 30th. We set a public hearing at our next meeting, we'll be past that date, so I assume that's not a problem.
We'll work through it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's really nothing to be done. There's just no way around it. Virginia Code Section 15.2-1800 provides very limited exceptions for when any locality in Virginia can convey an interest in real property, and an easement is one of those, without doing a public hearing, and there's simply not an applicable exception here. So in order to grant a valid, legally binding easement, you'd have to have a public hearing.
In that case, I would request a motion that we set a public hearing at 6 o'clock or as soon thereafter as we can get to it on our next meeting, which I think is December the 13th. Is that correct?
I believe so.
December the 13th. About issuing an easement to the town of Hillsville for a sewer project upgrade.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we set the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll be voting on setting the public hearing for the sewer easement. I'll start the voting with Philip McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Our next item under new business is to approve the consent calendar.
Make a motion, we approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion on the consent calendar? Hearing no discussion, I'll start the voting with Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Philip McCraw.
Yes.
Mr. Robbie McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That's all the new business items that I have. Does anybody have anything else that you're aware of? If not, we'll move to old business, and I have no old business items. Does anybody have any old business? Well, we'll check off the old business, which puts us to our board member comments, and I'll start with Mr. Philip McCraw.
Well, we've been hearing about the zoning. I want to go on record as I oppose it. I think you own the property and you're not damaging your neighbor with anything on it, and you're paying the tax. That's not a welcome word down my way. And I oppose the idea of it. I think we're doing pretty good in the county. And appreciate all the work that Mr. Watson does for us, getting our records, all the numbers he gets up for us, and the work he does, and all the staff. They do a good job of keeping us updated. And we're talking about community centers. I appreciate what the county does for the two down in my district, and I feel like they're very well run. Lambsburg and the senior center there on 52, I think they're doing a great job, and I appreciate the work they do and the funding the county gives them. I thank y'all. I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Philip. Mr. Hill?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. I don't know if many of you remember Stompin' 76, but that's been a few years back. That pertains to the music festivals. And I'm going to ask Mr. Durbin if you would check. I know at one time I read in the newspaper many years ago that there was a festival ordinance. And would you check on that ordinance to see if, Mr. Blair, would that solve his problem? I'm not sure the extent of what that ordinance is, but. But I mean, we may have an ordinance that covers it. I don't know. That's what he will have to review. Yeah, well, it pertains on the number of people attending, I think, from what I read, what I remember. So, but there still may be some other stuff that we may have that pertaining to that we might be able to.
I'd be happy to do that. There is a statute that allows you to enact a festival ordinance. I think the county does have one. It doesn't sound like it regulates the issues that Mr. Blair is concerned about, but there may be room to expand that to address those issues. Now, about 8 years ago, the Virginia Supreme Court struck down I think it was the Virginia Beach noise ordinance because it was unconstitutionally vague. So any noise ordinance that's based on being offensive or disturbing to others or too loud without having some objective requirements to it is unlikely to be enforceable. But a number of localities have, I think, successfully adopted ordinances that are based on decibel meter at a certain distance from the source of the sound. Those types of ordinances probably still would survive a constitutional challenge, so that's an option we can talk about as well.
Appreciate it. Also, I'd like to make a motion to formally request a proposal from Mount Rogers PDC for finishing up, working on the comp plan and possibly the cost of what they would do for zoning ordinance.
There's been a motion that we ask the Mount Rogers Planning Commission to work on our planning ordinance. Is that what you're?
And I'm just requesting the proposal.
A proposal,
Okay.
a formal written proposal, I think, is what you're asking for, updating the comprehensive plan and drafting a zoning ordinance.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
We're just in the planning stage, is that right? Not voting on anything, okay? Okay,
Just a proposal.
okay.
Any other discussion? If not, I'll start the voting. Mr. Robbie McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Philip McCraw.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
I vote yes.
And that's all I have to say, other than thank everybody for all the work you've put into to our financial management policies, and all the county employees, all the work that they've done. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Robbie McCraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, just like to thank everybody for being here tonight and for all the comments, and just ask that everybody remember that this is Veterans Day falls this week, and we need to remember our veterans and the sacrifices that have been made for our country and for our freedom. So I think that's just very important that we remember that. And I thank everybody that has served as a vet and has served in service to our country. And that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
I got a couple things to start with. I was going to see Mike if maybe I could get you to find out what you could for the citizens in the Pine Creek on the internet there, as far as CenturyLink. You know, I know they have put in a lot of new fiber in on 221, 58, 52, and I think a lot of it was paid for with federal and state funding and had to be done by October 1st. And I call about every other day and get absolutely nowhere. So, you know, just if it's in the ground, it's there. You know, our citizens are starving for it right now. We need to see if we can get something going on. Also, and Ronald, could you speak on this road abandonment for me, please? Ronald's been working on a road abandonment for a gentleman that come to me about eight months to a year ago, and it wasn't able to get on the agenda today, but I'd like to maybe get it to a public hearing. So, Ronald would.
The request is about 366 feet of Stonewall Road, got a fancy gap. Address is 347 Stonewall. It only affects that landowner. It's been surveyed to show that the adjoining landowners are not using that portion of the discontinued road as access to their property. All the items on the abandonment policy, Section A, have been complied with. So the next thing is to bring it to the board and ask for a public hearing to be set. We have to advertise for 30 days. With this being November the 8th, if we want to set the public hearing for December 13th, we'll hustle and get it in there. Mr. Joe Ardito is here tonight. He is a family member of the person who owns this. If you have any questions of he or I, we'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you for all your work on it. I appreciate it. And I'd like to make a motion that we put it on the agenda for public hearing next month, December 13th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll start the voting with Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Robbie McCraw.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Philip McCraw.
Yes.
I'll vote yes.
And I guess lastly, continue to remember the clerk of court's office and all in your prayers and stuff, and the deputies. It seems like it's COVID's continuing to be around and hit close to home a lot of times, and we've got a lot to be thankful for during the holiday season. I hope everybody has a good holiday and continue to pray and look help people out if we can. So that's all I got.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here tonight. I can tell you a small amount of history about a noise ordinance that did not work once upon a time in this county. It was about 10, 12 years ago, but we considered it and had a public hearing, and I was kind of amazed when I walked in the room and every single chair was full of people and the hall was full of people, and I was having a hard time imagining who would be so interested in a noise ordinance in the county, and I found out everybody was a fox hunter, and they were all concerned about the noise in the middle of the night with the dogs chasing the coon. So that didn't pass that night. So it doesn't say it can't pass in the future, but we did try that once upon a time. And I hope everybody has a nice Thanksgiving and appreciate everybody's comments and the information we received tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to our county administrator for his comments.
I don't have anything. Again, I remember all the veterans and the people that were lost recently and in the past, and had your prayers at them. Holidays come around and it makes it a tough time. So keep them in your prayers, and I hope everyone has a good holiday coming up.
Steve, you get the last word.
Thank you, Dr. Littrell. I would just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, happy and safe Thanksgiving, and also ask that I'll be preparing a resolution for your consideration at the next meeting. I'd ask that it be put on the agenda to approve a memorandum of understanding with the Attorney General's office for distribution of the opioid litigation settlement funds, and another resolution to approve the county's participation in the settlement with the Big Three distributors and Janssen Pharmaceuticals.
I don't think that would require a motion, but we will put you on the agenda.
Thank you.
Anybody got any last words? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Being a non-debatable motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.